All right, any questions, observations, please? You want to say something? All right, start. No, I'm asking you.
I have questions.
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
I have quite a few questions.
You can come closer, a bit closer.
It's very long.
I see.
In Surah Fatah, there is a verse, وَلِلَّهِ جُنُودُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا.
Yes.
Could you kindly explain the meaning of this, please? And I have a couple of questions on this one.
Listen, just a moment, please. You stand up. First read the literal translation of this verse so that everybody knows what you are talking about. And then tell me what the questions are. You should by now you should have learned the difference between questions and cross-examination. You are trending to shift to the region of cross-examination rather than questions now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be...
No, I know that you don't mean, but many things you say you don't mean.
Could you kindly explain the meaning first, please?
No, tell me the translation and ask the question.
I haven't got them, unfortunately. First time today I haven't got the translation with me.
Don't you know the meaning?
So I want to know the meaning of Junood, please. Oh, thank you.
All right. So get the verse and the meaning is written in the Holy Quran. Read it.
In the meantime, can somebody else?
Why?
What was it? Surah Fatah. The second was Surah Hadid.
First let's finish with this one. Surah Fatah I think नीचे नहीं है, देख लो और लिखा है।
وَلِلَّهِ جُنُودُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ
Correct.
وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا.
That's right, yes.
And to Allah belongs the host of heavens.
Hosts. Yes.
Of heavens and the earth.
That's right.
And Allah is mighty and wise.
Right.
Could you explain this, please?
No, why? Tell me. Put your questions.
The question was, does it mean that there is certain creation living in the planet?
What is the next question? Next part of it. What is the next part of the question?
Well, the other part is, there is another verse, لِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ.
Yes.
What that means and how they compare.
What is it written there in the Holy Quran?
I haven't got.
You have got the Holy Quran, you write in your hand.
It's different surahs.
Yes, all right, you will find out. Call Saki Sahib for your help. All right, in the meantime, we'll speak on this. Come, you can come and stand, keep standing there. Lillahi junudu samawati wal ard means whatever exists which can be put to some agency, which can work as an agent. That means whatever is conscious and can be employed to achieve certain purposes. Those are the hosts of Allah. So everything on earth works not only as a destiny of objective nature, but also works as a destiny of subjective nature. Man is also a recipient of Allah's destiny. In that position, he represents an objective nature, but he is also the means of disposing Allah's will and issuing decrees and carrying them out through the agency of man. So in that case he becomes the hosts of Allah. So everything that has a living existence and has some sort of consciousness, even bacteria who are employed by Allah in the grandest scheme of things to achieve certain purposes, they are called hosts of Allah. So distinction is not made between those who live on earth or upon earth and those who live between the heaven and the earth and those who live in the heavens, whatever they be. No such distinction is made. It's just existence of any form. Even angels fall into this category.
The other verse was وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ.
You know, the fact is, this verse is an explanation of Allah's attribute of Malikiyat. Allah is Malik, which means he is the proprietor of all things. Temporarily and sometimes in a concealed manner so that people may not understand it properly, his ultimate right of possession is shifted to others. Like you become proprietor of small things here on earth, and some other person may become a proprietor of some bigger things, and so on and so forth. The whole earth is divided in spheres of possessions. So everything seems to be confused here. People begin to be conceited about their possessions and they think that they belong to them. But in reality, they only temporarily own them. The result is that when they die, they leave it to others and they couldn't care less what happens to it after their death, you know. So that shows they were just temporary custodians. This continues until you may conceive the time when it is doomsday, when everything is destroyed and there is no being which can even temporarily possess the values of this earth. To whom will that belong? To Allah. Entirely, without any participation, without any confusion, without ambiguity. It will be so clear then that nobody shares the possession of whatever is on the earth or within the earth or belongs to it somehow or the other. So that means miras. He will inherit everything ultimately. Those who pass away, they leave things without having anything to do with them anymore. So those who inherit those things ultimately pass them on. But except for God, when He inherits, that is to say, then there is no claimant, no other one. And it will not be passed on to others by way of miras then, because Allah never dies. So He may give it as a gift or a charity or anything as He pleases, but He is the ultimate receiver of that miras, that heritage, which can never pass again into any other hands as heritage. So there is a dead end there. So truly and in all possible ways and means, Allah is the ultimate inheritor of everything. Right? Any other question, please? Little Ghazi, oh just a moment. After him, okay. You know, the finger is directed up to the last man, the Mubashir. Who is it sitting in the end? No, somebody else. Yes. It works in that direction generally. So if anybody else wants to ask a question, he thinks I'm directing at him. So when I was pointing at you, he thought I was pointing at him. Shah Sahib thought. Shah Sahib, come on now. Shah Sahib? Acha, I'm sorry. He wanted to go out. Okay. So I ask you now, please. Mr. Master Razi, eh? Right.
In Pakistan at the moment, the opposition party is led by a woman. Is there any law or rule in Islam which forbids a woman to become a head of state?
Is there any law of Islam which is being followed there in Pakistan? Why to pick on this particular aspect?
Well, in Orthodox,
much greater violations of Islamic laws are made. Injustice is committed, atrocities are committed in the name of Islam. Every wrong, every folly is committed, not only in violation of Islam, but in the name of Islam. And you take exception to this very little thing, on which Islam doesn't say anything against it. There is no positive declaration of Islam anywhere which says that a woman cannot be the head of state. I don't know anything about it. What Islam tells us is that a woman cannot be a prophet, a commissioned representative of God, which is a prophet, because of some physical weaknesses and things, constitutional I should say. So that is the only thing which she can't do or can't achieve. Otherwise, Islam nowhere stops women from participating in the normal way of life, provided that they fulfill the requirements of guarding their chastity. That is the overriding principle. Within that, as controlled and commanded by this principle, they can do anything. Ji? Malul Sahib, yes please. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Last week, Hazur directed that research should be made whether there was the word Red Sea or the name of the Red Sea was used in the
Bible.
In the Bible.
Correct.
Well, I have done some more effort.
Yes.
I see in the Exodus, the book of Exodus,
Yes.
by mentioning the crossing of the sea, they have used the word Dead Sea,
Red
Dead Sea, at least in the translation.
Right.
I don't know whether in the original text.
So it has to be further investigated. This is which rendering is this?
Well, that is the
King James version or what? Revised
Standard Version.
Revised Standard Version. Yes.
And 3 times they have used
So
the
that
Red Sea.
first of all you should compare the translations of various versions. And if you find that each rendering of the Bible, which is available to now, not each but many, most important ones, they also mention the Red Sea, then we can further investigate and find out the original source. And as far as the Hebrew goes, Mr. Oda, who lives in Islamabad, he is a scholar of Hebrew, he would be able to help us in that regard. You better, Saki sir, tell him to find out the original Hebrew versions here from London Museum Library or other places, and particularly concentrate on this word.
The second point that Hazur directed that research should be made. Well, it's not a research, but a small effort about the death of Pontius Pilate.
The pilot.
And she said in an implied way that because he, though washed his hand, rendering Jesus Christ crucifixion, but nevertheless he was a guilty party, and as such he should suffer, disgrace. Disgrace he did suffer. I have consulted 3 books on that one, and if you permit, I could read out.
Please go ahead.
Well, in the Encyclopedia Americana, say on page 96, it says Pilate is portrayed in the Gospel as weak, and in the works of the Jews Josephus and Philo as cruel and unjust. Pilate angered Jews by several, to them, idolatrous acts. He allowed Roman troops to bear their standard with images with God Emperor into Jerusalem. And then he goes again to say that Pilate was removed from the office for a massacre of Samaritans. He committed suicide in Rome. Other writing, among other acts of Pilate, exonerated him and made him and his wife Procula as Christians, and they are revered as saints in the Coptic Church. Then in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it says Roman sources provide virtually no information about the man or about his rule. It seemed impossible to reconstruct a coherent account of his prefecture. The Christian community, increasing making its way among the Gentiles, was anxious to avoid giving offense to Roman authorities. Christians and Jews were in intense conflict, sometimes violent, and the weight of the responsibility for the crucifixion was progressively shifted. Eventually, in Christian tradition, Pilate and his wife became converts, and the latter is a saint in Eastern Church. The Encyclopedia of Judaica, it says Philo, which is a Jewish writer, Pontius Pilate is depicted as cruel and corrupt, who appropriated temple funds. In Christian tradition, Pilate's death is attributed either to suicide or to be executed by the emperor. But that's true that he was disgraced and dismissed from the office, and while he was going to Rome, Tiberius, the emperor, died, and at that there is said that he...
The other day, Sayyid Imtiaz Shah Sahib also brought his findings on this subject, and they generally agreed with what you have said, but they are perhaps more clear on this issue. Number one, that research, that is also an encyclopedia, particularly on religious affairs, that says that although most of the Christian sources do not claim him to have been converted to his Christianity, but there are some which are minority. They claim that not only he became a Christian, but they also believe that his wife was a real saint. And number two, it says that it is said by some that he committed suicide, but others say that he was hanged to death or condemned to death by the governor of he was a curate or something. There was a governor above him of that province, so it was done by him. But most of the historical books which have some authenticity and some weight, they tend to state that Pilate was behaving more and more dictatorially in his region of influence and region of power. Particularly, he picked quarrels with the Jews. He annoyed them in so many ways. Particularly, two causes ultimately matured into his removal. Number one, as you have mentioned, that he brought the standard into Jerusalem, which annoyed the Jews and who considered this city belonged to the Jewish faith, and no non-Jewish Gentile standard should be brought here, which was a representative of Roman Empire, but with some irreligious or unholy inscriptions on it. Anyway, Jews took very strong exception to it. There were great writings. Thousands of Jews were killed by Roman soldiers which in disguise were mixed with the crowd at the behest of Pilate. And the massacre was so bloody and so, heinous that it also shook the hold of Pilate in general that area. Second thing which happened was that he did not misappropriate the property or the wealth of the temple for himself. What he did was that he took temple's money, Jewish temple's money, and diverted it for building a viaduct for the public usage. He was planning to bring a canal, a small canal, which is not a full canal but a viaduct, from some dam to some other parts for agricultural purposes. So because it was the temple's money, so Jews again rebelled, and as a result quite a few among them were killed, and the rioting was suppressed. Then the same rioting got shifted to Samaritans, and when that happened, Samaritans were quite strong and influential people. Although that uprising was also suppressed with ruthless force, but some of them sent a delegation to the governor, who called Pilate immediately to appear in his court and answer these allegations. And it was also said that he would be presented to some other Roman lords for questioning and things. Now it is said that when he left for that capital, I don't remember the name of the capital where the governor lived, before he reached, the governor died, natural death. And the second governor was not yet posted. So we don't know what happened to him, according to this version. He went there and was never heard of again. After this statement, it says that some authorities tell us that he hanged himself in desperation, and some others say that he was prosecuted and executed ultimately. Hazrat Masih Maud has mentioned this latter part, that he was executed.
Yes, but Hazrat Masih Islam in the Prophet Musa, see, when he referred Captain Douglas as Pilate, it was not in a way of derogatory, rather complimentary to Douglas.
Of course. Yes.
The inference
he didn't approve of Pilate's action at all. Hazrat Masih Maud did not approve of Pilate's act and his judgment, and considered it cruel, because he was cowardly as against Douglas, and he praised Douglas's behavior and courage. That's correct. But now let's concentrate upon the internal evidence. This is all which is said from various sources, and how it should be. The fact is that that part of these sources which claim that he got ultimately baptized and accepted Christianity is to be rejected outright, because the Christians in the early era were extremely kind-hearted and followed Jesus' teachings very strictly. It is impossible for him to have become a Christian and yet behave so cruelly and dictatorially to the Jews. Because had he become a Christian, the teaching at that time was that if somebody slaps you on one cheek, you offer the other. And no Christian could have behaved in the manner as he behaved in the post-crucifixion era. Number two, his end was very bad. All the sources indicate that he was disgraced, and at least his removal there was in total disgrace. Removal from the office whether he met that end, which is alleged to be suicide or hanging, whatever it was. But we know that in the end he was removed from his office in total utter disgrace. So that being so, if he had become a Christian, true Christian, and repented, Allah wouldn't have brought him to that end. What we see in general religious history is the fact that those people who act cruelly to Allah's dear ones, show such hostilities as was shown by him, or even accept pressures which should not be accepted by a person of any morality, those are generally punished by God. And it also happens that the same people to please whom he has done an unrighteous act, they turn against him ultimately. And he is punished at their hands, and he punishes them ultimately. This is the general history, this is the general pattern of religious history which is unfolded in the Holy Quran, and which we have also witnessed in our age. All those political people with power who turned against Ahmadiyyat and were unjust to Ahmadiyyat just to please some masses or some vested interests of mullahs and so on, were ultimately opposed by the same masses or the same mullahs. And again they were left with no choice but to confront them and commit the same atrocities against them if they could. And ultimately they were brought low at the hands of the same enemies. So this general pattern seems to fit with what is told of Pilate's end, and if you accept this pattern to be the general pattern, then as I can see, what should happen was that Pilate did ultimately begin to hate Jews, and the Jews began to hate him, and hostilities began. And because he was a very powerful ruler, and in those days the concept of power was much different from the days of today, so he must have committed great atrocities against the Jews. And the same enemies of Jesus Christ who compelled him to crucify him were punished at his hands. And then ultimately he was brought low and met his end at the hands of the same Jews. So this is the scheme of things which is generally carried out by Allah.
Well, doing the same connection, if I may refer that book, I read two books about the history of the early church.
Yes.
And there are very striking similarities of the treatment of the Christians and our community. For example, from Jerusalem, the instructions were issued to all synagogues. First it was that Paul should be not allowed to enter synagogue and deliver sermons or preaching of Christianity. And secondly, they said a formal edict was issued from Jerusalem, from the high authority of the Jews, that the new so-called Christians, they are not Jews, and formally, and they should not be treated as Jews, right. And that was a formal order by issue.
How many years after crucifixion?
That one was about 25 years after.
Yes.
And then the third...
then that must be correct, because it started with the Jews and with the government.
Yeah.
But unfortunately the Christians themselves accepted it with ready grace. With willingness.
Yes.
And they were quite happy not to be associated with Jews.
No, yes.
So the similarity between us and the early Christians ends there. We are not going to accept it at any cost.
No.
That we are not Muslims.
No.
See, that is the difference. Yes.
But later on, by the time of the Constantine, there were 7 generals in the Roman army of the Christians, say, and then the emperor at that time who was told was rather instigated against Constantine, and he said that the Christians are disloyal to the state, and all those generals were dismissed by the order of the emperor.
But that happened not only once but many a time. What actually happened was that during the 300 years, actually the Christianity became state religion in 308, just before the 9th year. And this is in conformity with the Holy Quran statement that the people of the caves remain in caves for 300 years plus some. That shows exactly that the historical statement is, in this case, is fully supported by the Holy Quran. But during all those 308 years, Christians were not constantly persecuted. That was not a continuous, process. The fact is that occasionally some kings came to throne who were even friendly to the Christian cause, and during their reign they were encouraged to come up to the surface of life, and participate in the affairs of the state, and they were given every opportunity to get their due shares of civil rights. But then again, out of jealousies which were created in those periods, some would-be kings nourished hatred against the Christians and nourished feeling of vengeance against them. So when such a person came to throne, he immediately ordered persecution of the Christians and started moving against them, the state forces, in so many ways. This allegation that they are not loyal to the state, this was also brought against them many a time. Diocletian in 268 said exactly the same thing, and in fact more methodically. He is the first Roman emperor who has gone about persecuting the Jews in a most methodical manner and in the severest way. And he was the last, in fact, in this order in chain of these religious hostile Roman emperors. After that we see a period of lull till 300 and some, when suddenly it was discovered by the Roman emperor that his own queen, when he thought of restarting these hostilities against the Christians, and he had actually passed orders. When the Prime Minister told him, his Prime Minister, that, "Sire, you don't know what's happening. Under your very nose, the whole country has become Christian, and your queen herself has become a Christian." So he ran to his palace and confronted the queen, and she said, "Yes, if you want to prosecute or kill Christians, I am the first one. Start with me." And there and then he accepted Christianity, and that was the end of it all. So this is general pattern which is not generally understood by Ahmadis, ordinarily because everybody does not have recourse to Roman history and things. They believe normally that the persecution of the Christians continued without even a respite for 300 some years. It's not possible. It is possible that within 100 years we may have confronted persecution at the hands of our enemies, as far as the time scale is concerned, to the same degree as they did in 300 years. But the nature of atrocities was much more hostile and beastly in those days than we are confronted with. And the secret there is in one of the the secret there is revealed in one of the verses of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. मैं देखता रूए सलीब गरना होता नाम अहमद पर मसीहा बन के मैं भी देखता रूए सलीब गरना होता नाम अहमद जिस पे है सारा मदार जिस पे मेरा सब मदार. That it is the blessing of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I have been saved from crucifixion. Otherwise I was also destined to face the same treatment at the hands of my enemy as earlier Messiah had. But he was the Messiah of Moses and I am the Messiah of Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is the special blessing of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I have been saved from that ultimate torture. So the same applies to us. This should not be forgotten. That if the nature of atrocities is much milder, although the spiritual trauma that is caused may be as great, but the nature of course is less beastly. That is mainly because of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it works in two ways. Number one, that blessing works spiritually, and the angels of God are ordained by Allah to look after this end so that atrocities are not carried beyond a certain border. And secondly, Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ummah, even in adversity, is far better than the ummah of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam when they became the Jews of the latter days. Although you can call them similar in some ways, as Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, the similarity is in detail. That even is, of course, has to be accepted by us because it is foretold by Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the intensity is not the same. They cannot commit such cruelties as the early days Christianity could. And when I say that, I don't mean the mullahs cannot. The mullahs can, but they are in a minority. The much larger part of Ummat Muhammadiyya sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not capable of going beyond a certain limit in committing atrocities and cruelties against other people. You know, this is why in every movement against Ahmadiyyat, it is the fellow Muslims from all sides who come to our protection, and the damage is caused much less than normally it should be. So this again is the blessing of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His teaching has left a lasting influence on the hearts of Muslims, who even if they turn to stone, they turn to softer stones, more brittle stones than the hearts of the earlier Jews did turn. Bashir Din Sahab? One sound.
I'm not sure of the exact area, but in some part of the book, I think it's the 10th or 11th surah, it's mentioning the reward of human beings, that the ones who are good in the eyes of Allah will go to heaven and they will stay there forever, except what Allah wills. And similarly,
no, this except what Allah wills, if you have the correct actual verse before you, it would be better. Because as far as I remember, this is said about hell also, but when it is said about heaven, there is an additional bit which you have forgotten, which makes the distinction. So unless this is what I want to say, that unless we have that verse before us, I will not be able to point out that distinction. That's right. The additional part about the heaven is Atan Ghaira Majzuz, which is not said about hell. Illa Mashallah is said, repeated in both cases. But Atan Ghaira Majzuz is not repeated in the case of hell. It only it only qualifies heaven and not hell, which means it is a favor of Allah which will never end, which will never be severed.
Everlasting.
No, ghaira mazuz means which will never be cut or severed. That means everlasting, of course. And that is not said of hell. So although up to that part the description is about the same, this appendix makes a very positive distinction between hell and heaven's durability, how long they would last.
Does this mean that hell will not last forever?
Of course it does mean that.
In that case, one would think that supposing somebody is in hell, he would be given a chance like we have in this. I mean, somebody may make a mistake in the earlier part of his life, and towards the end of his life he may make amends. Does that mean to say that somebody can also make amends while in hell, and thus promote himself to heaven?
Well, making amends is to be further elaborated before I begin to answer. You know, if let's conceive hell to be something like a penitentiary, where you are not only punished for the purpose of punishing, but for the purpose of reform. So there you can repent, all right, but you cannot undo the things you have done in the past, and you are not given a choice to repeat them anyway. So the whole situation is not covered by the word you are using. Somebody is taken for some illness to a hospital. That illness was his own doing. It was brought upon himself by ignoring some laws of nature, so it was a sort of folly for which he was punished. Let's conceive that sort of situation. And he is removed to a hospital. Now he can repent, all right. He can cooperate with the treatment and the medical care, but he will not be permitted to repeat that mistake anyway. So no question of reforming there in the hospital. But once he gets out of the hospital, then would be the real test, whether he repeats that or not. In case of hell, it will not happen, because out of hell will not be out of hell and into another trial, but out of hell he would be removed within a reasonable time to heaven, and from heaven there is no going back. So the whole situation is to be studied in this perspective.
It's a good thing for those people who've done a lot of harm, because they say, take care, after some time you'll come to heaven anyway.
But what is some time? You see, when you do something wrong, I mean physically wrong, and you fall ill, then you realize how time passes. And here normally the punishment is of shorter duration than the folly is committed. But if it is of a much longer duration, how can you imagine the time would pass? The time in ease passes so quickly. The time in difficulty and trial seems to have lost pace at all altogether. Sometimes it seems stationary. So this is why you have read so much about Hijr ki Raat, the night of separation. It never ends. And even 1,000 nights of meeting the beloved fly past as if nothing had happened, you know. So that sort of psychological attitude would decide the nature of the punishment as compared to the nature of heaven. Heaven would seem to pass much rapidly, of course, but because it would be never ending, and it had to be like that, otherwise heaven would be much shorter than hell. In reality, in our perspective, if heaven and hell are of the same duration, this is exactly what's going to happen. The people of heaven would think that the other day we came into heaven and now we are terminated. And the people of hell would think that they are everlasting. So when everlasting is said about the heaven, about the hell, it may imply that they would feel that the punishment is everlasting. It never comes to an end. When it is implied in case of the heavenly people, it's the greatest compliment to the longevity of heaven. If the heavenly people think it's everlasting, then it must be everlasting, because even in the ultimate pleasure, they feel it's never ending. So they should be studied in these two relative perspectives.
There are 6 questions sent from ladies' side.
Good.
I think they have been sent by a lady visitor who I presume has accompanied one Ahmadi lady here.
Yes, in fact, I myself, during my interview with her, encouraged her to ask her questions here. And I suggested that if she was a bit shy, Normally you don't meet such coiners in the Western world. But this lady was particularly very quiet and quiet type. So she hesitated perhaps to ask questions directly. So I said, you better write the questions and send to the Imam Sahib, he would represent you.
So the first question relates...
But have you asked permission of Saki Sahib to take over this representation from him?
From him or from her?
No, from him. You mean her? Yes. Please.
The first question relates a situation in which a Muslim friend has rejected his faith due to Western influence. Is it sinful if the friend is male and a female Muslim friend helps reconvert him?
No, not at all. It's most welcome, provided that she doesn't cross the limits and fall over to that category where in practice she abandons Islam, if not in theory. Provided that is guarded, then it's most welcome. Many lady in the history of Islam has guided men to truth and rectified their ways and reformed them. So it's a most welcome act of piety. Please.
The second question is, are prayers accepted in part Arabic and part English if it is all that is known?
Of course. In Islam is so grand-hearted about these things that what is required is a genuine effort, and in the process of that effort, even if you have achieved very little, it would be accepted as if it is the whole. So those who get converted to Islam, if they are making a genuine effort to learn the prayers and things, and in that process, of course it's impossible for them to learn everything on the very first day, in the very first moment, and they can't wait for the prayers to be said later on, So whatever they learn will be accepted not as a partial offering but as a total offering. That is the grace of Islam. So if she knows the prayer partly in Arabic and partly in English, most welcome to God, because Allah knows English very well.
Third question of the same lady is it possible to marry another Muslim from a different sect of Islam?
Is it possible
to marry another Muslim from a different sect of Islam?
If she has become an Ahmadi, Hazrat Masih Maud has not permitted it. Now there are two aspects of this question. Number one, the law of Islam. The law of Islam will not be violated if an Ahmadi Muslim girl marries a non-Ahmadi Muslim husband, with the result that her children would be legitimate children if they are born of such marriage. But if the law of Islam is violated in marriages, then the whole system goes wrong. And the children are considered to be legitimate and they do not inherit each other, the mutual rights are not established because the marriage according to the law of Islam is null and void. This is why the non-Ahmadi scholars issue this edict against marrying into other sects. Except for Ahmadis, all the rest of the Muslim sects, as far as their knowledgeable scholars are concerned, not the common man I mean, they know it, and this is their edict, that if any person belonging to their sect marries, if it's a female for instance, even it applies to the males. So this is why I said any person. Any person who marries into a sect other than theirs, his or her marriage would be null and void, the children would be illegitimate children, they will not inherit anything, and this relationship would be a master-mistress relationship and nothing more, a paramour relationship and no more. So, but Ahmadi's edict is very different from this. We believe that Hazrat Masih Maud took this decision for guarding the interest of Ahmadi ladies, their faith, and for guarding the interest of the children of such ladies. And he knew that mostly the religion is the religion accepted by the children is the religion of their fathers because they have the upper hand, at least in the Oriental world. So for this and for other considerations, because he knew that many an Ahmadi girl who was previously married to non-Ahmadis without any objection, that also should be kept in mind, was most ill-treated. And he used to receive letters, pitiable letters from such ladies, and he used to learn of such incidents of cruelty and atrocities just because they had a different faith. They would not be permitted to participate in Ahmadiyya way of life and so on. So for these considerations, which are also religious considerations mind you, being the Imam of the time, he issued the order that no Ahmadi girl would marry a non-Ahmadi. Now that would be a sin to reject the admonition of the Imam. In itself it is a sin, no doubt. But it is not the type of sin which can be bracketed with such sins as I have mentioned earlier. So the Ahmadi edict is the softest and the mildest in this regard. Ahmadi ladies are not permitted, and this is an institutional and administrative decision. But because the decision is made by Hazrat Masih Maud who was appointed directly by Allah himself, so no Khalifa can change this edict. No Khalifa can change this verdict. So if somebody violates this rule, then he is turned out of not Ahmadiyyat but out of the Ahmadiyya administrative attached to Khilafat. This is the measure we take. Otherwise, such ladies are considered to be, strictly from Islamic point of view, legally married, but no longer a part of Ahmadiyya administration. So they shift for themselves and they have chosen a course of separation from the mainstream, so let them enjoy that way. But they will not be permitted to destroy the life pattern of other ladies, and so that if they are accepted like that, then they would be encouraged to do the same things.
The next question is that according to the Quran, vanity is forbidden. Is it bad if done in jest?
Well, it depends on how far the jest is carried. Vanity is forbidden so that it may not cause injury to others, self-respect, to others' dignity and sentiment and so on. That is the reason why. That is one reason. And the other is that it injures the person who is involved in vanity himself, because it destroys his moral stature. If it does not destroy it, at least it injures. And it interferes with his spiritual development. So it has two ends. As far as the latter end is concerned, if some person is doing it in jest, of course within him it will be all right. I mean, he would not receive the bad influence of real vanity as far as his own soul is concerned. But as far as others are concerned, if they know it is jest, then it is no jest. It fails to achieve the purpose. And if they do not know it is jest, then they would naturally be hurt. So how far the jest is carried and how soon they are told and relieved of the pressure, it all depends on this, the answer to this question, I mean.
So the fifth question is, how do you work?
You see how quick the question, how quickly the questions are disposed of. Very correct and to the point questions. See, this is how the questions are framed. I am asking you, telling you, Mr. Rashid. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. How do you work with a devout Christian who shuns Muslims?
Well, the same weapons as are employed elsewhere in the world. Love and understanding and sacrifice and stooping low for the sake of Allah, not caring for your dignity sometimes, behaving humbly and perseverantly without losing hope, without losing courage, without tiring out. If you really mean to convert somebody, that's what I mean. And with prayers. If you seek help from Allah constantly with prayers, then you'd see things happening which are completely outside your power and scope. And those things happen in a manner as you know positively then that it is Allah's agency at work. It is not happening automatically or by chance. So the person who prays in a difficult situation, he sees the signs and he may not be able to establish that case before others who study it from an objective, different point of view. But he feels it subjectively, so he knows it. And the signs are so positive that he can't deny it anymore. So it has a double benefit. Number one, prayer helps him achieve the objective. And number two, prayer helps him enhance his own spiritual status and the quality of his faith. So of all the possible ways and means which I have mentioned, this stands supreme. This is over and above every other thing. You should begin your preaching with prayer. You should constantly pray along the preaching, and you always end up with prayers. Then you will see the quality of your preaching would improve immensely. And the sixth one, please.
The last question is, how do you define an evildoer from a blatantly evil and occasionally blasphemous?
Occasionally blasphemous. Evildoer is a larger term which covers also the person who commits blasphemy. That is also an evil. But perhaps what she has in mind is that who commits evil acts, personal evil acts, and the one who indulges in blasphemy against God or the holy people. If that is what she means, then obviously the answer is that the one who commits blasphemy is far more answerable and stands in danger of destruction, spiritual destruction, than the one who is compelled to do some personal acts of sins, but he is humble at the same time and does not indulge in blasphemy. Yes, please? What was it?
Yeah, this is Kim. The girl who's asking the question. The man asked the wrong question.
You see, this is why I wanted the questions to be sent to Sakhi Sahib. had you sent the questions to Saki Sahib, he wouldn't do that. Imam Sahib, why? Why you have asked the wrong question?
It was quite difficult to read. I might have.
Now, have you heard the answer? Have you heard the justification? The Imam Sahib tells us that because it was difficult to read, so he guessed. In part, you know. Yes, yes. So could you kindly put the right question now? Or shall we hand over this paper to Saki Sahib and let him try his luck?
The question was,
Yes.
how do you define an evildoer from somebody who is basically rude, not evil, from the occasional blasphemer?
The one who is rude, generally rude to people, or blasphemous? When you say, you draw a distinction between the one who is blasphemous and the one who is rude, do you mean to say that rude worldly wise, but not rude to the religious authorities and the holy people? And by blasphemous you mean the one who is rude to the holy beings and even to God. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
That's right. So the one who is blasphemous is committing a greater sin. Because one's first responsibility is towards the Creator. And the responsibility to the created ones is emanates from the first responsibility. So to be respectful to the Creator and the people who are godly, who are called in ordinary terms holy people, that is an overriding responsibility. And in the second place also he is responsible to treat human beings and other creatures of Allah kindly and justly, and also with humility. So if he is rude to them, that of course is a sin. But if he is a blasphemous, it is definitely a greater sin. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And do you want to ask another question?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. So that was the only mistake committed by you in this. Imam Sahib, you did well anyway. Huh?
There was one word.
I know. So, this is why when I can't hear the words properly or can't read, I hand over to Saki Sahib. He's an expert. He's an expert on these things. Yes, please. Yes, little Sonori. Come on. You're sitting too far behind this time. You used to sit here, generally closer to me. Why? Are you angry?
No.
So why?
I just came a bit late.
I see. Right.
I had a dream not so long ago
Yes.
that these Arab men, they're talking to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Who are talking to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
These Arab men.
Huh? Some Arabs. That's right. Yes, yes.
And they're asking him to prove to them that there is only one God, make him show himself. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, and then suddenly white light appeared everywhere, and then it felt as if I was burning.
Something was burning?
It felt as if I was burning.
I see. Yes.
So has it got any significant meaning?
It's obvious. What is your impression of this dream? Tell me first. What message did you receive yourself from this? Come a bit closer. Come.
Can't really think of anything.
You think of nothing?
I can't think of anything.
The main message conveyed to you is that today's Arabs again stand in need of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam's guidance as they used to in the pre-Islamic days. They are asking the fundamental questions. They are shown to be asking fundamental questions. That means that they are no longer truly the followers of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, otherwise they wouldn't put such simple questions to him. So they need to be re-Islamicized or brought back to the fold of Islam once again, as they started in the early part of Islamic history. Yes, Bashir Yar Saab, you always raise your hand when only 5 minutes are left. You're very punctual, very punctual. किताब है Waalaikum Assalam wa rahmatullah. Anyway, we have another night. Whatever would be left out, you can ask tomorrow, inshallah, right?
No question today?
No. Yes. No. One question. Yes.
In the beginning, I raised my hands in the beginning, and that
both hands?
There was a purpose for that, and that was Hazur last session of Majlis had said somebody should find out where the Red Sea is mentioned. So I made a study of the Bible, the Holy Bible,
very good.
And I had a reference for that which has already been discussed.
Right.
So I had brought with me the Bible to read the relevant passage.
But it is already done, so
it is already done,
so that question is asked and answered.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Good. Jazakumullah.
So that's why I don't want to come to that. Now I ask.
Yes.
Now I ask my question.
Yes. All right.
Just observation.
Please go. I disagree. Okay.
This Hubul Watne min al-Imam.
That's right.
This is one of the hadiths of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Could Hazur very kindly define the word watan according to Islam? Kindly define watan of a person in the following circumstances.
You're right.
A person born in a country whose parents were born in another country but residing permanently in the country of their migration. A person born in a country but have to leave that country permanently of his or her own choice. A person is forced to leave the country of birth due to unfavorable conditions, for example, drought, floods, and other natural conditions.
Also add a few more questions. A person with a green card and a person with visa and a person with just an asylum and no passport and a person with passport and a person with a passport but against whom the police has appealed already. What would be their nationality? Their respective nationality. These are also the questions of the same order, aren't they? Are they not?
What is for the hadith of the Holy Prophet sallallahu
You know,
alaihi wasallam?
I tell you, the fact is that wherever one person is, in whatever capacity he is, he holds some rights with in certain countries, whether he is within that country or not. If his rights belong to a certain country, that is his watan. But if he abandons those rights voluntarily, or on the other hand he is compelled to abandon those rights by a dictatorial regime, then it is possible that there would be a time when he would have no watan for a while. But most often than not, it would happen that another country would give him asylum or hospitality and give him the civic rights of that particular country. The moment it happens, he belongs to that country and that new country would be his watan. So he should serve the interest and cause of that country, even if it's against his previous country. So, it's a matter of mutual give and take. This is on which, this is the principle on which the societies are built. if you have your rights with somebody, you also have obligations to be fulfilled towards him. So the same applies to the state civilian relationship. If a person enjoys civic rights in any place, in any region, then there are certain obligations to be fulfilled on his part. So that is what watan means. तसल्ली दिन अल्लाह कराए. Yes, please. You know, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awwal Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, I'm not applying it entirely to this situation, but it reminded me of that. A very interesting remark of Sheikh Mubarak Ahmad Sahib, who is sitting close to me, is, and jokingly he said something. It reminded me of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awwal's comparison between his style of answering questions and the style of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wassalam. He said that Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wassalam tried repeatedly to satisfy the questioner's mind, and sometimes he would continue answering the question covering every possible region, and we would say that his mouth could be shut so in a few words. Why Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wassalam is taking so much pains? And that was also his style in writing. He would cover every possible region of answering that question, so that if he is not satisfied in one way, maybe he is satisfied another way. But Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awwal said that my style is exactly the opposite. I try to shut the mouth of the person who is. So some people tell me his heart is not satisfied. So my answer is, the heart is the question of Allah. Let the heart be satisfied by Allah. I am responsible for shutting the mouth. So, my style is not that of Khalifatul Masih Awwal. But still, sometimes I fail to satisfy certain hearts. And Sheikh Sahib thinks that your heart lies in that category. But I don't agree with him fully. So that was the last question? Yes, we know, and you are most welcome too, because everybody enjoys your presence, and when you participate, the whole majlis you can see, it becomes, livened.
It is already very late,
so all right. Next time, tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Right. Father Sahib, Azan, please.